Did you know that there's an entire library of reduced load data at Hodgdon.com? Well, there is, and there's multiple reasons why you want to consider running reduced loads for your hand loads, and that's what we're going to cover in depth in this video. Hey guys, Gavin Gear here from UltimateReloader.com. In this video, I'm going to talk about reduced loads, where you can get that data from Hodgdon.com. We're going to talk about why you might want to run reduced loads and specific considerations that you need to be aware of as well. Oh, plus we're going to put this 6.5 Creedmoor on the Recoil rig and show the exact difference in recoil between reduced loads and regular loads. Okay, so let's get into it. Why would you want to run reduced loads? Well, if you have a youth shooter or a shooter of small stature, reduced loads can make shooting a rifle in a hunting scenario or a target shooting scenario more pleasurable and less intimidating. Really good for newcomers as well. But there are other reasons to think about reduced loads. One would be preserving your barrel. The high intensity loads that we're used to shooting in today's modern cartridges like 6 Creedmoor or even some of the 30 cal magnums are going to basically torch your barrel. 22 250 would be another great example. So if you run reduced loads, it's going to cause less heat in the barrel, and that means less erosion of the barrel and actually the ability to shoot more shots in a string without doing that kind of damage. There's also the hunting scenario where you might not want excessive meat damage, right? So a reduced load could take the velocity down, and that can take the overall energy level down and still drop the animal reliably, but not overpenetrate or cause an overly large explosive wound channel, those sorts of things. And then we have vintage firearms. Have you ever shot that vintage rifle? I have a 1943, I think it is, Italian Carcano. I also have a 1942 Mosin Nagant. And, you know, those firearms are probably okay with full pressure, but I might feel a little bit better with reduced pressure just to take it easy because of the vintage metallurgy, the age of the weapon, and so on and so forth. But there are things that we also need to take in mind that are considerations and things to think about. First is, if you go too low on your reduced loads, you could definitely stick a bullet in the barrel. You know, propellants have a sweet spot for the charge level, for the heat and the pressure to burn enough to burn completely to push the bullet all the way down the barrel. And it's pretty amazing in some cases how quickly you can stick a bullet as you start to reduce the load. So it's really important that you have a reliable source of tested reduced load data. Also, complete powder burn. So just like in the case where we might have a squib where we stick a bullet in the barrel, we might not have complete combustion. We might have excessive carbon fouling, you know, and a dirty burn, that kind of thing. Cycling of semi-autos would be another consideration. So if we're talking about 308 Winchester reduced loads, and we have an AR-10, we'd want to make sure that the firearm is going to cycle reliably and that we don't have issues with ejection or anything like that. So some testing might be necessary. We're not going to go specifically into considerations for semi-autos. We're going to be focused mostly on bolt action for this particular story. And then also velocity consistency. If we're not in the sweet spot of the burn potential for that powder, we could also have kind of wildly fluctuating velocities. That means a larger extreme spread and a larger standard deviation that could cause problems with accuracy and so on and so forth. So here's where you can find Hodgdon's reduced load data. Go to Hodgdon.com, open the Reloading Data Center, it's the red button, and what you'll see here is standard, subsonic, and reduced recoil. So guess what? I think it'd be cool if we did a story just like this one, but on subsonic instead of reduced recoil. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see that one. So after the data loads, click on reduced recoil and then select the cartridge, the bullet weight, the manufacturer, and the powder that you're interested in. As of the filming of this video, I took a look at this. For rifle, we have 243 Winchester, 6.5 Creedmoor, 270 Winchester, 7mm .8, 7 rem mag, 30-30 Winchester, 308 Winchester, 30-06, 300 Winchester Magnum, 303 British, and 375 H&H Magnum. Just note here that some of these loads happen to have reduced recoil, but if we see reduced recoil as a prefix to the name here, that is specifically downloaded, doesn't just happen to be light recoiling, if that makes sense. So the reduced recoil 6.5 Creedmoor, for instance, is down a level in velocity and down a level in recoil and intensity. And that was the test scenario that I set up. Okay, so what I wanted to do was to do a direct comparison between reduced load data and conventional load data, both from Hodgdon.com, both with the same bullet weight. So what I did was I went to the 120 grain bullet weight and found a reduced load. And interestingly enough, that uses H1000, which is a Magnum powder. And we've got 41.3 grains, which should produce 2,489 feet per second. And the pressure is 39,400 PSI. So pretty low, really. But it's going to hold that pressure for more of the duration of the burn, I'm guessing because that's a slower burning powder. And maybe that's how we can optimize that recoil as well. Okay, then we have a conventional max load. You can see in the standard load data, we have starting load and max load. So I went to the max load here, and we have 45 grains C, which means compressed load. So when the bullet gets seated, it's going to compress that powder column just a little bit. That's 45 grains of H4350, which is a faster burning powder. And then just to make things interesting, I thought, well, what if we threw in a max load for a heavy bullet? So I picked one of the heavier bullets in the load data, which was the 153 grain A-tip, which I've got over here. And that turns out to be a 41 grain charge, also a 4350, and that should produce about 2,631 feet per second. Whereas the other load with the 120 should produce about 2,965 feet per second. Okay, so pushing 3,000. Let me talk a little bit about the recoil rig and the testing setup that we have here at Ultimate Reloader. So we've partnered with Duosoft, which is a manufacturer of data acquisition hardware and software, and then also PCB piezoelectronics, which makes sensors, in this case a load cell, that can very accurately determine rearward forces from the buttstock, and we can do up to about 200,000 samples per second. We can see the shots and the trace of the recoil impulse in real time. This is a complete game changer. It's a new system that we got recently, and previous to that, we had to do a whole bunch of post-processing just to get a look at the recoil curve. So this is a great setup, and both PCB and Duosoft are leaders in the industry, the firearms industry, for data acquisition of multiple types. Okay, so we loaded up the cartridges, got everything set up, and took the shots. Let me show you some action from that. 31-32. So what we can see here is a very clear difference between the reduced load data and the max load data. So the lower curve we see here on the graph is the reduced load. And interestingly enough, the max load for the 120 and the max load for the 153 produced a very similar curve. So we're accelerating that 120 grain bullet a lot faster. The 153 is kind of putt-putting along, and the forces are pretty similar. So if you think going to a lighter bullet can significantly reduce felt recoil, that might not be the case. Of course, we're looking at max loads here. There is variability that you have with your loading ability with the different powder charges between starting and max. But I found that really interesting to see how closely these align. And let's see what that close alignment actually is in terms of numbers. Okay, so for the reduced load, 120 grain AMAX bullet behind 41.3 grains of H1000, we had a peak force of 659.3 pounds. Now, I'll just note here that this is kind of like a rifle against a concrete wall, right? Our frame on the recoil rig is more or less an immovable object. you're not actually going to register 659.3 pounds against your shoulder because it's going to be spread out over a longer duration of time because of the compressibility of your flesh. And that impulse is a very short period of time as well. So it's not like a sustained 650-pound push into your shoulder. But what we can do here is we can compare things in a relative sense with a high level of precision. So our velocity was 2,582.3 feet per second, which is slow, which is what we want, right? This is a reduced load specifically. Stepping up to the max load for the 120 grain AMAX, that was the 45 grain compressed load, H4350 this time. We stepped up about 23% in peak forces to 812.1 pounds and had a velocity of 3,132.9. I'm kind of thinking this would be a pretty awesome varminting like coyote cartridge or something like that. Okay, so then the heavier bullet, the 153A tip, had 41 grains of H4350, and that brought our peak recoil force up to 825.2, which was exactly 25% increase over the 659.3, with an average of 2,725.1. Actually, these are just straight up velocities, right? It's a single shot. So the velocity for that shot was 2725.1. Okay, so we had a baseline in our reduced recoil load, and we had an increase of 23% for a max charge with the same bullet weight, and we had a 25% increase in peak force with the heaviest bullet in that target load data, target bullets for load data at Hodgdon.com. So really interesting results here. And, you know, I think this whole reduced load thing is really cool because you can take a Magnum and make it less of a Magnum, you know, more like a non-Magnum. You could take something like a 30-06 and make it feel maybe more like a 308. And you could take a rifle with a barrel muzzle like this and make it feel more like a rifle with a break, right? There's a lot of really cool flexibility that we have here depending on what the scenario is and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And it's really great that Hodgdon has taken it upon themselves to do quite a bit of testing and load development and to provide this data and data that you can use in your rifles to experiment with this stuff. So in conclusion, reduced loads solve specific problems, whether it be a smaller shooter, an inexperienced shooter, someone that is sensitive to recoil. It could be for the preservation of game meat, the preservation of your barrel, right? There's some really good reasons to do that. But we also do have to take care and attention that we don't stick a bullet in the bore, that we don't have ridiculous wild velocity variations, right? We have to find a powder and a charge that is optimized for this reduced load scenario. And that's exactly what the Hodgdon load data does. And I'll mention one more time, there is a whole subsonic section on Hodgdon's website. And, you know, I just kind of discovered these recently and I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to experiment with this. And of course, that means making some videos. So if you have specific ideas for the subsonic video, specific cartridges, specific bullet weights, even specific powders that I can look at within Hodgdon's data, please let me know. And when we eventually do that story, I'll take that into consideration. So if you have specific thoughts about reduced loads, if you've been working with reduced loads, you have specific reasons and results, please drop a comment. I'll see you down there in the comments section. That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're watching Ultimate Reloader on TV and want to take advantage of free resources, exclusives, and hot deals, just hold your camera phone up to the QR code, tap on the link, fill out the information, boom, you're getting Ultimate Reloader emails. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. Thanks again for watching.